Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I'm going to have a story up later this week on how the Commanders have helped Jaden Daniels this offseason. So some of it may be obvious, but I just think it's important to keep noting what they're doing to support his development because I think that's key. I think you can look to Chicago and see what happens when you don't surround a young quarterback with the right tools for success. That's coaches, that's everything. Caleb Williams might get it this year, but the first year they failed him. This team did not fail Jaden Daniels, and they continue to build around him. Anyways, that'll be up on ESPN.com. So, what I want to do over the next couple episodes is do a better or worse. And I'm going to go position group by position group, starting with the offense in this episode. And then I believe on Monday or Tuesday, I will be doing the defense. But I want to start with the offense because it's the offense and you got to pick one. So like I said, I want to go over each position group. And we've kind of talked a lot about this throughout the offseason, but just to kind of boil it down, looking at all these groups and Kevin Sheehan and I had a good little discussion on the roster the other day. So if you didn't hear that, go back and listen to that. And here we go. So I want to look at the offense because this was a very good offense for sure. Fifth in points and seventh in yards. They have not finished in back-to-back years with top 10 offenses, or not, they haven't finished with top 10 offenses in back-to-back years since, take a guess, 19, you have to go all the way back to 1991. And it was a three straight year period, 89, 90, 91, where they were top 10 offensively in both points and yards. Have not done it in back-to-back years since then. Not so coincidentally, the last time they made the playoffs in consecutive years was 1991-92. So maybe a bit of a correlation. It's amazing how many bad offenses we've all had to watch over the last couple decades, but they are in a good spot now. So let's take a look at the offense. And I think it's kind of hard not to feel like they're better in most areas. And that, of course, is a good thing and to me, a necessary thing given the teams they play this year. So I was just looking at before we started doing this, the top 7 defenses in scoring last year, Washington plays each of those games. So they actually play 8 games against teams that finished in the top 7 in scoring defense last year. Now they say 8 because they play the Eagles twice. But here are the other teams, and this is where they finished. The Chargers were first, the Eagles were second, Broncos third, Chiefs fourth, Vikings fifth, Packers sixth, and the Lions seventh. And by the way, Miami was 10th. So that's why I think it was important to continue bolstering the offense and not resting like, oh, well, you got this young quarterback over here. Things can work because it worked last year. They have added to it. And I think that's very, very important given the schedule is tougher overall. But I think when you're facing and when you look at the NFC East and when you look at their schedule, I think it was necessary to keep bolstering that offense. And let's start with the offensive line. So to me, the offensive line is better than it was last year. Now, when exactly will it be better? Because you are putting together a lot of new parts and there are some questions on there, right? Because we don't know when Sam Cosmi's coming back. But let's start with obviously a couple huge moves this offseason, trading for Laramie Tunsil and then drafting Josh Connerly. And with Tunsil, you're getting a guy who's a 5-time Pro Bowler. They have not had a left tackle this good since Trent Williams left. Leno did a nice job for a couple of years. Coleman was fine last year. Tunsil gives them a legitimate Pro Bowl tackle. Now, I know in Houston, there were some issues there at the end where there's all the penalties. So just kind of buckle up for some of those. And then there was talk about him maybe not being the best leader in Houston. I don't know that it was a bad situation as much as it was. It's just not, it's what they wanted from him, and it's not what he truly is. And not everybody's a true leader, right? Not everybody's comfortable in that role. He doesn't have to be that guy in Washington. Like you have Tyler Biadasz, Sam Cosmi, and even guys like, to be honest, guys like Allegretti and Wiley, like those guys they're just professional. So you don't need Tunsil to come in. I think what Houston needed him to do is to kind of they would want a guy, they would have wanted a guy to kind of help mentor maybe young players, whatever it was. He doesn't have to do that here. Now he can help Connolly, but so can Andrew Wiley, and so can others. So what they needed from him here is just be a really good left tackle as you have been throughout your career. And if he does that, then that's going to be a massive upgrade for them. So that, and that's um, a big deal. And I like, then they draft Connolly. I love that they improve the line as much as they have. You look at the NFC East, look at the pass rushers they're playing. Look at the Giants. The Giants have really improved their defense just by they go out and get Carter, but they have Thibodeau, they have Burns, they have Thompson. So that's a really good defensive front. Dallas has drafts as Araku to pair with Micah Parsons. The Eagles have Jalen Carter. So you needed to really improve that offensive line to not just help Jaden Daniels, but to first of all, it's just smart. So I don't care what division you play in; it's just a smart thing to do. But in this division, I just gave you 6 games against teams that have a really good defensive fronts. So you had to do this, right? You had to, if you want to protect Jaden Daniels, your best asset, you had to make these kind of moves. And I like with Tunsil that it was it was creative thinking to go get him when other options weren't going to come through. Uh, but it was necessary. And last year, Jaden Daniels, the pressure percentage. So let's look at some geek out on some stats here. So pressure percentage, the percentage of times that Jaden Daniels was under pressure was like it was the 15th most in the league. So kind of in the middle of the league there. Um, he was under pressure, considered under pressure, less than Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and then even Jalen Hurts. Now, the difference with Hurts and Daniels, for example, Hurts was pressured a little bit more, according to the stats. And this is True Media and Next Gen Stats and all that. So, according to that was the case. But Hurts also had the most time in the pocket to throw. So they protected him. And, maybe if you're holding the ball a little longer, you're going to be under pressure a little bit more too. Daniels was not holding the ball long. He had one of the faster release times in the NFL. So it was 2.48 seconds. And, but he was still under pressure that much. So I did not feel like the line was under siege the way it was in other years. And I felt like they had a much better balance and smarter play calling for sure last year by a decent amount. That helped. But I also think you needed to improve that line. Like you look down the stretch, they were not as good. They were not as good run blocking. They were not as good in protection. And I think I told you the other day, I had one executive tell me like, hey, this is good for Jaden because, when he looks at this roster, like now you can play with more trust behind this group. So the question there, I like Tyler Biadasz. I thought he was a terrific pickup last year, but think about this too, how much they've overhauled this group. There's only going to be one guy who started most likely if it goes the way that Washington hopes and Connolly becomes their starting right tackle. And when Cosme's back at right guard, you would have one guy who was a starter here in 2023 on that offensive line. That, of course, would be Cosme. So they've really done a good job of overhauling this group. And if Nick Allegretti and Andrew Wiley ended to be your backups, you're in really good shape because they have some versatility. And I think they're just true pros. And I always, with Wiley, I even talked to him about this at one point last year that I always appreciated how in 2023, like that group was maligned and he was getting crushed by, all over, right? He never changed his disposition toward anybody asking a question. He was always professional, polite, and just understood his role as a pro. So I just always, but the point of that, only saying that, not so much is just that the way he handles things as a pro, and that's a good person to have on your roster. Same thing for Allegretti, if that's what ends up happening with them. Um, I like the drafting of Connolly. I think it obviously gave him the ability to now move Brandon Coleman inside, where I think he will be pretty good. And I think Connolly can be pretty good. The question I have for this group is when will that happen? Because it's not like it's not like they were terrible last year. They weren't. I did not think down the stretch they were the best run blocking group, but they weren't terrible. So when does this group really kind of mesh? How long does it take? You don't have Cosme. We don't know yet when he'll be back. Probably some point in October would be my guess right now. But we don't know. And so when will this line become what we think it can become? I do not, and I think it'd be hard to do that right away. And you have a first game against the Giants where you kind of need some good pass protection. But when will that group become the group that we think it can be? That's the question. The one thing that could be good for them is that their improvement will coincide with the playoff push. So I think that's something that could help them down the stretch. Um, because again, we don't know. And like we don't know yet what Connolly can do at right tackle. I think that would be a good spot for him, but we don't know. I remember, they drafted Brandon Sheriff with the idea that he would be a right tackle, which was a fail. And it took about a week or two into camp before you saw like, okay, he's not a right tackle. And that's when they moved him. Will Connolly show that he's so young, man. He's only gonna be turned 21 during the season. So that's a good kind of player to develop. But when does he get to the point where it's like solid? Like what you just need him to be is solid. How does Coleman adjust to, let's assume he takes over left guard. And I would say that because it doesn't make sense to put him at right guard if you want to start him because then you're making another switch. You're making two moves when Cosme comes back, putting him in and someone else moving to another spot. So I would get him comfortable at left guard and just let him compete with Allegretti for that job. And then you could have Wiley at right guard if you wanted to. And so there's options there, but the point is we don't know when it's all going to take place. But we also don't know how good Connolly or Coleman will be at their respective spots. And so I think that's the lingering question over this group. While I think it's better, I think they've done a really good job of improving it. When do they really start to kind of mesh and become that group that can lead them down the road? I like the depth they have. Again, Allegretti, Wiley, Nate Herbig, I think will be pretty good. Dieter, I think's got to play better than what he showed last year. And so I think that's something that we'll see what happens there. But I like what they've done there. I think it's a good group and it's a necessary. Those were all necessary moves and protect your best asset, but also by protecting him, it's like you should be able to run the ball better, right? Like I know one of the knocks on Tunsil has been his run blocking. I think he's still going to be pretty good in that area here. He also can get out in space and block. And with the screen game, with those guard tackle counters that they love to run, I think you have more athleticism potentially all over the place. With Connolly, with Tunsil, with Coleman inside, you got a bigger body inside there. So that's it should shape up to be the best group they've had in several years and one that could play together and be very good for the next several years for sure. So anyway, offensive line better. Quarterback, it's better. And I know it's the same group, and here's why it's better. Because Jaden Daniels will improve. And so you get that 1 year of experience under your belt, and you have an offense that can continue to evolve because of what you can do. And then I think it's just a matter of like what he's a guy who's so focused on football that that he's been working a lot of things or studying whatever he needs to because that's just what he does. And he has an unbelievable ability to retain things. And he also is very, very driven. And I don't think that's changed one iota this offseason, despite all the newfound fame and attention. I know he had a lot at LSU. It's even more now. He is now a face of the NFL, not just a guy who was the Heisman Trophy winner at LSU. He is one of the faces, the young faces especially, of the NFL. That's why they sent him over to France to help promote the game earlier this offseason. So, but he will get better. And there's always a lot to learn, right? And some of it could be little things that we may not even realize. Sometimes it could be the way you check, plays that you check into. Your pre-snap reads might be a little bit quicker. Maybe one of the big things is, and they worked on this, and I was really impressed last year when they talked about him working on it with keeping the play alive, because not all quarterbacks can learn it overnight like I think he kind of did. and he got better at it right away. But that's something I think you can still get better at because I felt like there were some big plays missed at times if he had kept his eyes upfield or if he had, I mean, not even kept them upfield, just lifted them upfield. Because sometimes earlier in the year, there may be he had a tendency just to kind of lower and go. He did a much better job as the season went on of keeping his eyes up. So can you hit some big plays out of that? That would be one thing. But it's also, like I said, I think the mechanics of the position, his footwork is good. And I think, but that is one thing that Dan Quinn talked about. It's one thing Ryan Porter talked about on here the one time, improving that area. So I do expect him to get better there. And as Porter talked about, it's not just the footwork in terms of, for him, the footwork was introducing different drops or perfecting different kind of drops to throw off the timing of the defense. So it's, basically adding it. It's almost like you have a fastball, but then you have different kinds of fastball, like two seam, four seam, whatever. And so I think it's just more to throw off the defensive backs a little bit more and to protect or to combat any like timing they might get on a play because like, oh, we've seen this play, but it's a different footwork. So if you're watching the feet at all, or we're looking at the drops like that, then it could throw you off. So I just think that's like he's kind of trying to take it to an elite level with what he works on. But I do think that you can do there are things that he can do, but it's the good part is he's a very focused person on getting better. And despite, again, there's when you have the kind of year he had and the popularity he has, I mean, he was the number two selling jersey on Fanatics this year. The only guy who topped him during the season before the Super Bowl was Saquon Barkley. And so otherwise, it was Jaden Daniels. So there's a lot of popularity for him, which means attention, which means all sorts of opportunities the offseason. You don't see, you'll see things here and there, but you don't see a ton, and you're not seeing them all over. You'll see them at games, like at a basketball game in town, but that's normal, right? And it certainly sounds like whatever he's doing, it's separate from the football stuff. In other words, he's not going to say, okay, well, I can miss this OTA here because it's voluntary and go do this. Like that's not what he's going to do. It's not who he is. Anyways, so that's why I think he'll be better. The other thing is that helps is year two of the offense and the support system is all back. There was a point, and it's kind of funny because the way Dan Quinn set up this coaching staff, it was with the thought that, well, if Cliff Kingsbury leaves, well, then you have others who can ascend. Brian Johnson, Tavita Pritchard, David Blau. But at one point, it looked like, well, Kingsbury was going to stay, but the other ones were all getting interviewed, and they could have kind of wrecked that transition plan that Quinn he had put a lot of thought into it, and it was very intentional the way he set up this coaching staff. So there was a thought point where it's like, would you where they might perhaps lose one of those coaches and kind of throw that succession plan out of whack a little bit? Well, the answer is no. Those guys all stayed, and I think that's a really good thing for Jaden Daniels. So again, year two with the same group, year two with Kingsbury, a guy that he meshes with so well because they work a lot the same way. I mean, they both come in ultra prepared. They're both football nerds. And I think it's just a really good marriage between those two, play caller and quarterback. And, so it's a really good thing for sure. And then getting Mariota back, another help. It's a guy that he really respects, really listens to. And I just think they did such a good job setting this up for Jaden Daniels and to have all of them back. And then you have that year experience and all that. That's why I think it's going to be better because they can build on what they know with him. That's the beauty of getting all those guys back. He's not starting over with any coach, whether it's a play caller, whether it's a position coach, because anytime there's any change, things do change. And it doesn't mean it's worse, but it definitely changes. And so I think that's something that's going to be fun to watch how it affects him. The other part that helps him is the improvements around him. And I'll get to the receivers in a minute, but the offensive line, again, I think he can play with more trust as that group certainly meshes. And then getting guys like Deebo Samuel, I think that's going to help him. A healthy Noah Brown would help him, but I'll get to the receivers in a second. So anyways, quarterbacks better. That's why. All right, running backs, to me, it's the same. And I think the one, if you want if you want the hope, I think it's also a question. It's with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. we don't know what he's going to do. And, you can have a lot of confidence in him, a lot of faith in him, and have a projection for him and think he will do well. But we don't know because we haven't seen him at all outside of the one there's big time competition outside of the one game at Arizona. Really good job at New Mexico. We know that, but what's it going to look like here? We don't know that yet. And I think if they had taken a Travion Henderson, one of those Hampton, one of those big time backs, we have a much better sense of what they could do because you saw it at a high level. And I just think where they would drafted, your kind of the expectations are higher. With Krosky Merritt, you got a guy drafted in the seventh round. Now, some of that was because he had to sit out last year. So where would he have gone? And it's also a deep running back class. So I think that pushed him down. So I think had he played, he probably goes higher. In a different year, he probably goes a little bit higher. But this was a really deep draft class of running backs, and he only played one game last year. So they may have gotten a big time. They may have gotten a steal in the seventh round. I definitely know people who think that that's the case. But can we say for sure that it makes them better? Well, we just don't know. And, so you can't, it's hard for me to say that, oh, they're better because they got the seventh round pick. But I think the potential is there for it to be better, but you can't automatically say just right now without having watched them play on paper, it's hard to say that they're better. Be, but again, potentially, yeah, absolutely. And then you need Eckler to stay healthy. Really good third down back when he does. The concussions are a concern, but when he is healthy, he's still productive. And one thing I do like is look at that screen game. Now you have with Connolly, with Tunsil, with Coleman inside, you have more athleticism on the field and on the offensive line, which helps the screen game, which helps Eckler for sure. So, like, that's a good trickle down effect for sure. Eckler's got the durability was always going to be the number one thing as you get older, and especially for him coming off those concussions. Then you have Brian Robinson. Now, I think by this point, we all know what Brian Robinson is, right? So I don't think you should go into the season with these outsized expectations for him, and I don't know that anybody would. I do think the run game can be better because if you get better blocking up front, one of the issues down the stretch last year was certainly the run blocking, right? It wasn't just Brian Robinson, it wasn't just the backs. It was not very good run blocking. And I'm telling you, man, I brought up the New Orleans game a few times. But that game to me was eye-opening how the Saints handled that offensive line. And I just hadn't seen it handled like that. I felt like they had a pretty good year, and then that, for whatever reason, the last several games was not as strong, but they attacked that group for sure. What's the trickle down now for Brian Robinson, for Eckler, for McNichols, for Krosky Merritt, whomever? So that's what I'm curious to see, and that could make Robinson more productive. But he's also, again, he's not a home run hitter. He's a guy that can, sometimes some of his better runs gain 3 yards because it would have lost two, right? So I think he can help you, but I do think you want another back there with him. Can Krosky Merritt become that guy? That's going to be the big question in camp. I like how he runs, Jacory, I'm talking about, and I know I know he likes to go by Bill, um, but he does like it becomes a cliche, but he does run angry. And I like that he's always moving forward. I think there's a lot to like about his game. I just think to take that leap at this point would be a little bit difficult when I haven't even seen him on the field against veterans. So, but that's why I say to me the running back group is the same. And then, but I do, Chris Rodriguez last year, you go into last year, you thought that going into the year, I would have thought that he would have done a little bit more. Now he did play later in the year, but going in training camp, I thought, I liked him a lot as a rookie, and it did not pan out that way. And so you just have to kind of wait and see with running backs how it goes. And I want to see him in camp, want to see him in preseason games, like what he can do. But I think that's why you just have to kind of say, for now, it's about the same with an asterisk because it could get better. So let's go to the tight end group. Again, not worse, it's the same. Zach Ertz back, John Bates back, Ben Sinnott back. So same group. And at this point, Zach Ertz is what he is. John Bates is what he is. The wild card is Ben Sinnott. And that's where again, we don't know. Like, could it be better? Sure. But he had to really he has to have a good training camp to show that he can be a guy who's ready to ascend to a greater role. Like, he's not going to surpass Zach Ertz or anything like that this year. But can he be capable of more? That's what they think they have to learn that, right? Down the stretch after the New Orleans game, he wasn't a big factor. He wasn't a factor at all. Like, his play time really went down after that. His number of routes run went way down after that, including in the playoffs. So, you can deduce that he did not finish the way they would have hoped going into the year, right? So I think that's going to be one to watch for sure. I think John Bates is really good. I think again, he is what he is. He's a really good run blocker, was not a factor in the pass game very much at all. Could do a little bit more, but I don't think you're going to make a living throwing to John Bates. You need him to handle what he does in the run game and protection, whatever. So Zach Ertz, I mean, he had a terrific year, and he stayed healthy, and that's always going to be the key. Can he do that a second year in a row? And if he can't, then what do they have? That's where Ben Sinnott would need to jump up, or one of those undrafted guys from last year, Yankoff or whomever. Um, we will see. But it also, I think if that happened, I think this offense has some versatility at receiver or the depth at receiver on paper that maybe you could kind of run a different style of offense for a little bit until that. But that's the thing with Ertz. Can he do it? Because if he does, he was a terrific security blanket for Jaden Daniels. Just his ability to get open over the middle in key situations, you could trust him. And I think I really, really enjoyed watching him work during the season, before practice, and just the things he worked on. It's easy to understand why has been productive and lasted as long as he has. The durability at this stage is always, always the key, for sure. All right, last group, wide receiver. On paper, I'm going to say better, and I think there's going to be a slight, I don't know about asterisk. I'll explain because I think it could be. I think there's some questions that I do have for this group, but on paper, going into at this point, it's a better group than last year. And it's funny because I'm going to look back a year ago when we were at this point, and what were people saying? Like, who's going to be the number two receiver? Like, Olamide Zaccheaus, Deami Brown, oh, no way. Noah Brown wasn't even here. So, it got so bad in camp that people were hoping Martavis Bryant could be the answer. And that was always fool's gold, right? So, but that was the thought. So a year ago at this time, like, Zaccheaus is coming off a tough year. Deami Brown had never really ascended to where people had hoped. And then when they get here, Zaccheaus rebounds with a solid year for him. Deami Brown has his best year and finished very strong. So where they were at a year ago to where they finished and to where they are now, it's just a better group. And even though they lost Zaccheaus and Brown, they're still on paper a better group. And I will say this: before I get into the others, one of the things, and I talked about this with Logan Paulson just earlier today, just casually on the phone, because I always like to get his opinion on things. And he brought up a good point, which is why I want to credit him for the point. But it's like, this was a really good group last year, and that's important. That room was really good. The group understood what each of their roles were. That cannot be understated. And I think for like guys like Zaccheaus and Brown, I think understood what they were here to do. And that doesn't always happen. I will say, like, too, with Zaccheaus, the thing that always impressed me with him is one, he was a really good teammate. And first of all, I thought they would keep him. But one, he was a really good teammate. And two, his effort was tremendous. And so, like, to me, he made winning type plays where, if you remember the one time where Eckler has like a 50-yard game, but he fumbles at the end, and you have Zaccheaus sprinting, running motion to the other side and then sprinting downfield on that side to get in on the play and recover a fumble, when, like, I don't think you'll see a receiver do that, make that kind of play very often. Like, That's the kind of guy you want to have on your roster. He is, this is why I was like surprised that they didn't retain him because he is a Dan Quinn type guy. Doesn't mean he's the best player, but it doesn't mean he's a contributor. He understands what his role is, what he has to do. He understood in the Bengals game that he wasn't going to be a big factor in that game, that he wasn't going to play as much. But what he was one of the first guys off the field to always congratulate them. So I think he really embraced who he was. He knew who he was. I think same thing for Diami. So can this group get all that? Well, we'll see. And I think Deebo Samuel, like I love the pickup because to me, there's no harm, no foul there. It's a fifth round pick. And you may get the best version of him because if he wants a new deal, you got to produce. And if you don't, then people are going to give you a lot less. So this, I think you'll get the best version on the field of a Deebo Samuel. And that's why on paper this group is better. I think Noah Brown, first of all, I'm going to go back to Deebo, but one of the things I like, and this is where the trickle down effect of that offensive line, like you give him a little bit, you give Daniels a little bit more time. Where can you get Deebo the ball, and what kind of space can you create with a little bit of extra time? That to me is worth watching because he's so good running after the catch that I think that's going to be a bonus for him for sure. And now I think when you add Jaylen Lane in the fourth round, the draft pick, now you could put him and Terry. You get some mix and matches here with the speed getting down the field. Maybe it opens something up for Deebo underneath and get that run after the catch ability. And then I know, listen, man, I know Brock Purdy just signed for over 50 million a year, but Deebo will be playing with a better quarterback, a more explosive quarterback. And I think Purdy's done a nice job. But there were some times last year I'm watching Deebo, some of the targets. I'm like, Jaden hits that one, or gives him a better position to run after the catch, whatever it is. So how much of an effect will that have on Deebo Samuel? We'll see. But I like the pick. I think he's going to be good. Will he stay healthy? And the one thing is like he doesn't miss a ton of games, but he has been, last couple of years nicked up. But if he stays healthy, I think he's going to have a good year. You have the right coordinator to work with a guy with his versatility. That's a good thing. I think then you look at Noah Brown. I know there's some people in there are like they're excited to see what they have in him again. And I think they know what they have in him. But he was on pace. He had what, like he had 35 catches in 11 games here. He signed like the week before the season started. So just imagine if he was there all off season, OTAs, mini camp, training camp, like he is now. He is healthy now. So that's a good thing for them. Like he gave them a bigger target. He's made some really good catches down the side. Just a good target for Daniels, a good route runner, competitive guy, good blocker. Shoot, there are times where they're running him as a lead blocker on some counters. And so you can do things with him, but he's got to stay healthy. And so with him, like the last couple of years, let me see what he had. He's missed 13 games combined the last 2 years, Noah Brown. He did play 16 games in 2022. So there is a track record. And then 2020, he played 16 as well. So he has done it. And if he can do that, if he can play at least 13, 14 games, 14 would be 14 or 15 would be every game would be ideal, but like with his injury history, if you can get 14 to 15 out of him, that's terrific. And I think he can be a very productive receiver for them too, just with some of what they've added around him. Again, with Deebo work in the middle or wherever he gets to, and pairing, maybe playing Brown off of a guy like that or off of a guy like Jaden Lane, depending what he can do. Now, Lane will be interesting because we don't, again, fourth round pick, don't know. What I do know is he has speed, and what I do know is he has versatility, and he's got a fearlessness to his game. That's what you see it as a punt returner, and he's going to help there for sure. I think he'll help as a punt returner. As a receiver, we just don't know because I want to see how let's see how he is working against the veterans, not just in OTAs or minicamp, but as we get to training camp, where does he improve at that? And is he getting open? Is he creating space? Jahan Dotson and I think Jahan Dotson can still do some things in the NFL, but Jahan Dotson was a really good college player. He struggled at times because he couldn't get off press coverage. And so like that's going to always be an issue if you can't. How does Jaylen Lane do with that? Like, and can you keep him off the ball to help him in that way? I think the answer is I think they can, but we don't know what he'll do as a receiver. But I do think that speed, you can take advantage of it. And I think you have a coordinator like Kingsbury who is very good at taking advantage of whatever a guy can do. So I do like that pick. And I like the fact that Brown's healthy and they have Deebo Samuel to pair, of course, with Terry McLaurin, who also to me is, I mean, he's coming off his best year too. Amazing how many guys had their best years playing with Jaden Daniels. That's why I think it's, that Deebo's in a good spot, that Lane's in a good spot, that Noah Brown will be in a better spot even than he was last year because, again, full offseason working with the offense, working with this quarterback and this coaching staff. So I think that's all going to help. So that's why I say I think they're better. And then you look at like the depth there. There's names like this is one thing, and I always tell you, don't chase names, you chase fit. And if it's a big name who fits, great. Well, what they have here are a lot of big names. The fit we have to see in terms of like on the field and all that. But I think, or just what do some guys have left? Like, what level is Deebo Samuel at? I mean, if he comes through, he's a really good talent. Um, but what does he have left? And then you look at like a guy like KJ Osborne, struggled last year in New England, didn't really do anything here, but in 3 years in Minnesota, he caught 158 passes, including 48 in 2023. So good possession receiver. So it gives you some depth. What does Michael Gallup have left? Don't know. We'll find out. So there is some depth there. And then Luke McCaffrey, and to me, he's a big wild card. I almost forgot him, but he's a big wild card in this because you need to see more. And can he give you more? What kind of things will he improve on this offseason? He is a worker. But so what kind of things will he have improved on this offseason that can help him contribute more than what he did last year? Will he get those opportunities? Will be relegated to special teams? Don't know because I think there's much more competition at the end of that roster group than there was a year ago. And again, we may still have some of this question about who's the number two receiver. I think what we saw last year is it depends. And Dan Quinn said this all the time, and I understood it's situational. Some games it could be this guy, some games it could be that guy. But I do think they have more potential for big plays with Lane, with Deebo Samuel, to pair with McLaurin. So that's why I say that group is better. So you look at it like this is a better offense than last year. And again, they needed to be better because one, you just should always keep improving. You should not assume that there's an automatic improvement because you're together another year. And they didn't take that approach. They were aggressive in finding some things. And I also think, when you're facing this, you have the schedule they have, the division they're in, you want to keep building that side of the ball. And then we'll get to the defense probably on Monday. So anyway, folks, hope you enjoyed that. That's my take on better or worse for the offense. Pretty much, folks, they're better or at worst, they're the same in a couple areas. So that's it for me. I appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you sticking to this point. I'll be back on Monday with another episode. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you next time.